And now, without further delay, I'd like to welcome our guest speaker tonight, Julie Borneman. She is the past president and current board member of Loudoun Wildlife, and she is the owner of Watermark Woods in Hamilton. Watermark Woods Native Plants in Hamilton. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. All right, let me share my screen here. So there we are. My website and my email address is there on the title screen. If you need it, you can always email me with questions after the show. And I try to get back to things in a timely manner, but it is getting to be the busy season, so we get lots and lots of emails. There's the library's website, and thank you to the library. They have a great website. If you're like Audible or read on your Kindle, you can check out books that way as well from the library. That's what I do. This is Loudoun Wildlife's website, one of our co-sponsors. And this presentation tonight is done for free, but if you like it, even if it's just, a couple dollars worth, you can click up there at the top and join donate. We're a membership-based organization, so we really appreciate every membership and every donation that comes in. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Loudoun Wildlife Spring Native Plant Sale that's coming up April 22nd, at Morven Park. There'll be 3 or 4 vendors there, so it's a great chance to come out and see tons of different varieties of native plants and also speak to a lot of different people about who know native plants very well. So there's a lot of expertise out there. So if you don't get all the information you need tonight, you're welcome to go there and pick some people's brains. So this is my website, and I wanted to point out a couple things on here. At the top, there is this inventory link. Actually, first, let me go over here to links. A lot of the things that I'll be talking about tonight, you can go to my website, watermarkwoods.com, click on the links, and you will get a link to things that I talk about. So that is very handy. The other thing that I wanted to tell you about here is the inventory tab. So if you click on that inventory tab, when you're looking for plants, you can leave the plant name out and put in your conditions, the sun, the water, even deer resistance, because I get a lot of questions on what plants to plant if you have a lot of deer. And then you click on filter and view, and it will give you a list of plants. So those are just a couple of resources that I wanted to point your attention to before we get heavy duty into things here. And hopefully you can help yourself in the future to some of that information. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time with the basics because I know you are all here tonight to watch this presentation because you know that a native plant evolved here and it evolved with the wildlife, and so it provides the most benefit for wildlife. And we know that we all live in this food web, and so the relationships between wildlife and the plants and clean water and humans is essential. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. We're going to move right on. One question that I get a lot during these presentations are, what is a cultivar? Because that's a word that I do use quite a bit, as opposed to straight species. And just real quick, what that is a straight species plant is the plant how it normally occurs in nature. A cultivar is usually something that's selected for a specific trait. Here you can see Monarda didyma, which is the second picture should be the first, is the straight species. So that's Monarda, which is also called bee balm. That's how you would see it out in nature. That's exactly what it looks like. They found all the Monardas are very susceptible to powdery mildew, which doesn't hurt them, but it doesn't look very nice. So they found one in nature and it was resistant to the powdery mildew. So they cultivated it by cuttings. So it's a type of asexual propagation, which is also known as cloning. And that's called Monarda didyma Jacob Klein. And so the clone is exactly the same as every other Jacob Klein that's out there. Whereas the Monarda didyma grew from seed where it had genetic material from 2 parents. And so all the Monardas are genetically different. So when you see the Latin name here, it's Monarda didyma, and a name behind it in quotes, that represents a cultivar. So a cultivar is usually a named species. Some of them are naturally occurring in nature, like Jacob Klein, or the other one that I have pictured here, raspberry wine, which has a unique flower color. But some of them are also developed in a lab or through other means. So a few other of my favorite Monardas, just because I had that flower up there, is Monarda punctata, which is the one on the far right, which is really cool because it grows this flower, and then out of the center of the flower, it pops up another little flower. So, and it just keeps going like that. It's so cool. Monarda media is a really pure pink Monarda, and Monarda fistulosa is another one that's kind of a purpley color. And the media, fistulosa, punctata are all straight species there. I'm sure there's more cultivars out there that I just don't have listed here, but just something to be aware about when you're looking at plants and you're in nurseries, that cultivars exist. They may or may not be good for the wildlife. They're usually bred for a reason that's attractive to us as humans. Flower color, leaf color, disease resistance, stuff like that. So if they've changed the flower structure, or if they've changed the color of the flower, the color of the leaf, usually they're not as palatable to wildlife. And here's just a printout of all the different cultivars of that one Monarda didyma that we sell at the nursery. So even though we're a native plant nursery, Monarda didyma is the best one by far to get. There's a lot of options out there, and they all have something different. And here we toggled to the grid view so that you can see all the different ones. And you can see in the top, the second one in there, Monarda didyma Be Happy, they totally changed what the flower structure looks like. So wildlife may not be using that as much. So this is a house in Loudoun County that was for sale a while ago, and I took a picture of it, and I'm sorry if this is your house. It was just a good picture with a representative landscape that you can find in Northern Virginia. And I looked at this house and I drove by and I kind of cataloged what they had growing in their yard. And if you look at it, there is nothing from this country there. The fescue or the turf is all from Asia and Europe. Boxwoods are from Europe. There was a plum tree from Europe, azaleas from China, crepe myrtles from Korea, barberries from Europe, Japanese maple. So nothing in that yard was from the United States. So there is nothing in that yard that is supporting the native fauna. So how can we be better? Because if our yard is not feeding things, it's just a food desert. It's got no purpose other than to look at, and we're pumping all this money into it to make it look nice for us, but it doesn't do anything else. So I kind of took some liberties, and if I could plant at that house, here's kind of what I would have planted. And this is what it would look like in the winter. I added a serviceberry back in here where they had crepe myrtle growing. I added bladdernut. I added around the mailbox cardinal flower, pink muhly grass, added witch hazel. In through here on either side by their pillars, we put in some pink muhly grass and creeping phlox. We put in some Adam's needle yucca, which is an evergreen, which is pretty cool. And then a few other fillers in there as well. And so that's what it looks like in winter. But as we get into spring, we can see things are starting to perk up. They're getting leaves. Back in here, our witch hazels are starting to get some color into them. And in summer, we've got some color. You know, you can pick a color scheme when you're planting your yard. Here we've got a lot of white and red for spring, which are unusual that's summer. I went too far. Let's just go on with summer. So we got a lot of yellow and white, or red and white for spring. Now I'm all off. And then as we go into fall, you can see the muhly grass here has got its beautiful pink plumes on it. And we've got some of the phlox blooming over here, some of the late summer phlox, or maybe those are asters that bloom in the fall. But there's a lot of options. And now this yard, when I added up all the plants that I put into it, now supports over 500 species of butterflies. So there's a lot we can do with our yards without making a lot of changes. And if you just add an oak tree, oaks themselves plant 100 or support more than 500 species of butterflies and moths. And if we don't have butterflies with those soft, squishy caterpillars, we don't have birds, because 90% of our native birds can only eat caterpillars when they're feeding their young. So here's what it looks like, and this is what it was. So we can really be a lot better. So I want to talk a little bit about how much natives do we have to be? Like, it would be great if all of our yards were 100% native and providing all that food for wildlife, but it's not realistic. So here's a picture from my yard on the top left. I will confess that it is my yard. The plants up here at the top of this picture on the left are Japanese akuba. I like them because they have a, they're evergreen. The leaves have a little bit of variegation to them. They've got little sparkles, I guess, little yellow spots on them. And then on the bottom to complement them is green and gold, which is a low growing native that gets covered with these yellow flowers in the spring. And it gets me, you know, a couple flowers all season long. So you've got a lot of interest there. And I just love how it grows and fills in there. And, you know, it's a great replacement for a lot of those low growing ground covers. And it's a good example too. You can see on the left where there's some mulch there. The goal in my yard is to not have to mulch at all. Because if I'm mulching, I'm spending money and time that I don't want to be spending on my yard. I want to be, you know, looking at the flowers and hanging out in the yard. I don't want to be doing all that work. So green and gold, the Latin name on that is Chrysogenum virginianum. And there's several cultivars with a little bit different shaped flowers, more profuse flowers, a little bit different heights. But that's generally about a 6-inch tall plant. It likes part sun to part shade, but it can handle quite a variety of conditions once it's established. So that said, I just want to let you know that I'm going to try and use the Latin name for all the plants tonight, and I will try and interject the common name. But it's important to know those Latin names because a lot of times when you go looking for something, it could have the same common name in different places, but mean a different plant. So the Latin name is always more specific if you can have it. And people get intimidated by Latin, but there are no ancient Romans that are going to come around and correct our Latin. So don't worry about it. I'll say one plant one way today and another way tomorrow, and who knows if I'm right. So don't be afraid. So we're going to talk about making choices when it comes to our yard. You know, you may choose that you want to do 50% native or just plant one native and be better than you were. You know, that's a huge step. But when we're making choices, a good place to start is at our mailbox. On the left, I call it the mailbox clematis, but it's that Jack Monte clematis. And, you know, everybody in Northern Virginia has it. Why do we want to be like everyone else? So here's 3 different native alternatives that we can use. The first one that's on the actual mailbox is our native honeysuckle, Lonicera sempervirens. It's also called coral honeysuckle. It's also called trumpet honeysuckle. So it's a good example of why it's important to know the Latin name, because if you come into one place and say coral honeysuckle, they may not know what you're talking about. They may only know it as trumpet honeysuckle. But if you come and tell me I want some Lonicera sempervirens, I know exactly what you want. On the top right is our native passion flower, and that's probably one of the most exotic looking flowers we have. Passiflora incarnata is what it's called. It also goes by maypops. It's got those cool curly little fringes on there, and that's how you know it's the native, when the fringes are a little twisty like that. If they're straight out, it's not a native clematis or not a native passion flower. We also have another one that looks sort of similar, but with a much smaller flower, and it's got the coloring is mostly whites and yellows. That's Passiflora lutea, or white passion flower, or yellow passion flower. People call it different things. On the bottom, the yellow one is our native jasmine. It's called Carolina jessamina. And now I'm going to have to think about that one. But it's our native Carolina jasmine. It's very cool because it is Gelsemium is the Latin name on that. It's evergreen. And you can see, if you look back a little bit behind the flowers to the left of that picture there, back in there, it's the flower buds, and they'll come out like that. Mine are starting now, actually, which is really unusual. It's just this weird spring that we've been having here in Northern Virginia. And it is, so it's yellow. It looks like it's blooming. and you're thinking, oh, it's beautiful, it's pretty, look at all those little yellow flowers. And then they open up to this and it's bright, sunny yellow, and it's even better than it was before. One more note about the honeysuckle, it's an evergreen. You can chop it back and chop it back and it doesn't mind. And a lot of times I'm out there taking pictures of it in December because we get the random flower on it in December, and it is such a nice surprise. A lot of people like their sedums, and there's a gajillion sedums out there, the stonecrop family. And on the left there, you see a whole bunch of different ones available. But on the right is our native stonecrop, Sedum ternatum. And it looks so pretty in the spring. This picture doesn't really do it justice because it gets these white flowers with like little salt and peppers in it, and it's really sweet. It's really cute. It looks great in a flower pot as well because it'll droop over the side. It's very hardy, so when little parts break off of it, I'll just shove it in the ground and they grow. And free plants are the best plants. So if you can do that and make it work and grow some plants, more power to ya. Here's one everybody knows on the left, Grandma's bleeding hearts. You know, we see those all over the place. They're in everybody's garden. And that's when people always say, oh my gosh, I didn't know it's native. So how do you know if something's native or not? Because on the right, we do have a bleeding heart that is native. Well, there's a few things that you can use. If you live in Virginia, the VA Plant Atlas, vaplantatlas.org, that's one of those links you can find on my website. You can put in the plant name, it'll find it, and it'll tell you if it's native down to the county level. Also, the USDA has a decent website where you can look at plants and see if they're native on there or not, down to a county level as well. And one that I've been liking a lot over the last few years is BONAP. It's BONAP.org. And that's been really handy. And you can see that all over the United States as well, what's native. So that's a great resource no matter where you live. And then also, you know, there's a lot of local groups. You know, we are lucky to have Loudoun Wildlife here in Loudoun County, but there's master gardeners all over the place that can help you out with that. We've got a great chapter here in Loudoun County. There's master gardeners in Northern Virginia, but I think most states have a master gardeners that you can check with, wild ones. So there's a lot of organizations that can help you. The National Wildlife Federation is another one that can help you out here. But, you know, if you're familiar with this bleeding heart, you'll know that they put out their flowers in the spring, and then by summer, once it gets hot, they're gone. That plant is nowhere to be found, and you're just left with bare mulch. Our native bleeding heart on the right, also called fringe leaf bleeding heart, it's Dicentra eczema. It has these beautiful frilly leaves, so I think it's way more attractive. The flowers are a little more elongated, just as nice color though, and the flowers stay longer than the other bleeding hearts, and it will flower all summer long. So you'll have a plant all season and you'll have flowers pretty much the whole season. So that's a winner. I don't know why anybody would plant the non-native there. Here, a lot of us are familiar with columbines, the non-native on the left, and we have a nice native columbine, which is beautiful and very elegant. It's a little more delicate looking, but hardy as can be. And it's a great companion to put in with ferns because once the columbines are done blooming, your ferns are popping up. And those colors, that yellow and red together, are very striking. And to me, I don't know, when I see all those different colors and they're so bright there on the left, it looks kind of gaudy. So the native to me is much, much more elegant. Here's a couple that I love to see it when people rip it out. Lyrope on the top and dwarf mondo grass on the bottom. And if you've ever ripped out Lyrope, you have got to get every little piece of the root or it just comes right back. It's ridiculous. But our native blue-eyed grass is very cool. Sisyrinchum angustifolium on the right. It's in the iris family. It likes it in pretty much full sun, and it likes moist but well drained, so it cannot have wet feet. It'll rot like instantly. but it's in the iris family, and those little blue flowers are at the very end of the leaf, and they open in the afternoon. So when we've got them down here in the nursery, we come down and they're all closed and it looks so-so. But by noon, when the sun's hitting them, they all open up and it's very, very pretty. And it's a clumping grass or a clumping plant. So it tends to kind of make these little clumps and it's very pretty. Sedges are this is more replacements for the last slide, more replacements for the lyrope or lily turf, they call it, some people, and the mondo grasses are sedges. So here's 4 different sedges that I just love. The first one, Carex woodii, called Pretty Sedge. I haven't grown myself before, but I've been getting a lot of calls over it or for it this winter because Mount Cuba, is another link you can find on the website, just posted a, they do these reports on different plants. And so they planted all these different sedges and then they say what's good and bad about them and they give them ratings. But they rated Carex woodii very high. So I'm going to grow it this year, and I think you should try to grow it too. It's hard to find right now, but I do know we've got some reserved for us to come in the mid to late spring. So I'm very excited about that one. I like, most sedges are semi-evergreen as well, which is very cool. So I like the Carex flacosperma or blue tinge sedge because it's just got a really different color in the shady garden. Most sedges like shade, some can take sun, but this one definitely likes it in the shade, and that bluish tint to the leaves are really cool. Carex plantaginia or seersucker sedge has these cute little puckers on the leaves, and it does get a nice flower. It's kind of a brown flower head, but it's very unique looking. And then my favorite sedge on the bottom left is Carex grayi, gray sedge, which has these spiky balls that stay all summer long. And I like, it's one that can take sun. And I've planted it around the base of some of my trees so that I don't have to mow or mulch up to my trees. Fills in, gets, maybe 18 inches tall in the full sun. And our turkeys, we have wild turkeys. The turkeys love to eat those spiky balls off of it. And little boys love it because it kind of looks like, satellites, or, they think they're fun to come and pop off those spiky balls. So that's just a cool plant, kind of a conversation piece. So if you don't use sedges in your yard, you should try them because they're very underutilized. Most of them have somewhat of an evergreen characteristic to them. So, they're definitely a winning plant. We see a lot of the 2 on the left here. The top is lamb's ear. Just, it's a really soft plant. A lot of people will use it in sensory gardens because, it's got a great feel to it. And the bottom left is ajuga, which fills in. It gets kind of a purplish flower to it. Both of them are extremely aggressive. If you plant them, they're very hard to get rid of. Lamb's ear especially, you'll find it in the woods, you find it growing all over the place. So I would say it's, borderline invasive, even though it's not on the invasive species list. You just find it everywhere. So on the top is pussy toes, Antonaria neglecta. There's also one with a little bit wider leaf called Antonaria plantaginifolia. And it's got a very soft leaf like that. You can also use it as toilet paper if you're a survivalist, which is kind of a fun thing. But the story goes that a mother cat's kittens were drowning in a lake, and she used a pussy willow to get them out, and the leaves of the pussy toes to dry their feet. And that's why the flower developed looking like a cat's paw. So they're very soft little flowers. They'll spread and fill in very nicely for you, and they are somewhat evergreen as well. The bottom right is Salvia lyrata, or our native sage, also called lyre leaf sage. There's a cultivar called Purple Knockout that has purple leaves. So if you really like some color in your garden, you can get that. And it has these really nice, delicate purple flowers on the top of a stem. So it's got a neat growth habitat in that it grows close to the ground, but it sends up a flower stalk, and it's a spreader. So you'll find it spreading all over the place, but it is pretty easy to rip out. So we're going to cover a couple more ground covers next. Snow on the mountain is the top left. The second picture in there is Pachysandra that you see growing all over the place. And the bottom picture on the left is English ivy, which is invasive. It's on the invasive species list. I didn't think I had it in my woods, and then I discovered it. Now I've been battling it for about 3 years, and it's been impossible to get rid of. So some great options to replace those. The first picture on the right, so it'd be the third picture in, is our native Pachysandra. It's evergreen, has a very cool flower that you see on the right, just to the right of that picture, that comes up before the leaves emerge, and it does grow new leaves, but the old leaves will stay all winter long and they'll stay green. It's very pretty. It's not variegated like the one on the left, but you can see by the way it's filled in around that tree, it will fill in really nicely. It likes to grow under trees. It likes a little bit of leaf litter to keep the soil rich. And it is a very cool plant, and it has those nice glossy leaves that we like to see on our Pachysandras. The bottom plant here on the left is the flower, and on the right is the leaves, and that's wild ginger. And Native Americans did use it as a seasoning for their food. The flower is a really cool color, maroon. It likes to grow under trees. It likes to be in shade. It doesn't like it super moist. So that's a Serum canadensis. The Pachysandra is Pachysandra procumbens. Ground covers, I think, are super essential when you're talking about plants because, you know, for me, it's all about getting rid of the mulch. I see a lot of Spanish bluebells. It is an invasive plant. It's pretty. I'm a sucker for a blue plant. Let me tell you, blue is my favorite color in case you didn't know by our logo. But Spanish bluebells, I planted some at an old house and they ended up showing up everywhere. And now I find them here, and I never planted them. I don't know how they got here, but they're here and I'm constantly ripping them up. But our native Mertensia virginiana or Virginia bluebells are the most iconic Virginia plant you can plant. They like to grow in moist bottomlands that flood, so they do like really rich, somewhat moist soil. That's also called cowslip because the leaves, you don't want to put anywhere where you're walking. The leaves, when you walk on them, they crush, they get very slippery. It's a very important plant for our early season pollinators. Some of these pollinators that evolved with the bluebells are specialists and they can only feed on the bluebells. So it's important to have this variety of plants in your yard to serve a variety of pollinators. But they do like it moist, but I do have some growing here on the top of a hill where it's fairly dry, and they've been doing good. They've been holding their own. They flower every year, but they're not spreading. If you live in Loudoun County, you probably know where to go the first week of May or so to see the bluebells blooming. We've got some great patches of them that they grow in mass and they're beautiful. But they're neat because the flower starts out pink, and then as they mature, the flowers turn blue. So if you can grow bluebells in Virginia, you gotta do it. They're just fantastic. On the left are knockout roses that we see everywhere. That is one really overused plant. You see them, I think every builder has got knockout roses on their palette to plant. But we have several native roses. Two of my favorite, the top is Rosa virginiana. The bottom is Rosa caroliniana. I cannot tell the difference if I see them out in the woods. They look almost the same. The biggest difference is the top one, the Rosa virginiana or Virginia rose, is usually gets 4 to 6 feet tall and can grow in parts of full sun. And the Rosa caroliniana or Carolina rose or pasture rose gets only 2 to 3 feet tall and can grow in full blazing hot sun. So if you like roses, they're a great option to some of those garish knockout roses that you see everywhere. They're very pretty. A lot of people love their hostas, myself included. And so a couple plants that we plant every year are annuals. I picked petunias for this picture here. And the bottom is the hostas. And some great alternatives for those are, the top picture on the right is Tiarella cordifolia. And it's got a very unique leaf shape. I wish I had a better picture that you could see the leaf shape. And it just gets a mass of white flowers. And there's some that run and some that clump. So if you don't want it to spread too much, you can look for a clumping one. But as far as spring flowers go, it's probably one of the most fragrant flowers that I've ever had. I just love when they're blooming. They're super fragrant and just a really sweet smell. And then on the bottom is one that a lot of people say, oh, I didn't know that was native. But on the left, you can see what Heuchera americana looks like. Coral bells, or some people will just call it Heuchera. It's, usually got a green leaf. Sometimes there's a little bit of variegation, reddish brown in the leaf. It gets a white flower spike in the spring. There's also Heuchera villosa, which gets a white flower spike in the fall. And then on the right, there's tons of cultivars of this Heuchera. There's reds and greens and purples and blacks and like every color under the sun. So, it makes sense that a lot of gardeners would like that, because for shade, most shade plants bloom in the spring because that's when they get sun. So if you can add different colored leaves in the shade, then you've got some really nice interest there. But, if you're going to plant some of those cultivars, it's important to plant the straight species as well. So while I have several different of these cultivars, because I do like the color in the shade, I also have an abundance of Heuchera americana because it's better for the pollinators. So I want to make sure that they've got a whole salad bar of food if they need it. So they have lots and lots to choose from. On the left is loosestrife, which is an invasive plant. I have seen it growing here in Loudoun, right along Route 7. I've seen it in a lot when I grew up in the Midwest. When I'm driving back there and alongside of the roads or in marshy areas, you see a lot of loosestrife, and it's pretty. I mean, it is a pretty purple flower, but we've got a few really nice options to replace it. We've got liatris, which gets this big plume, spiky, poofy flower. It looks, like almost like cotton candy. It's so pretty. And there's several different varieties. The one that's pictured here with the bees on it is Liatris microcephala, which is a shorter clump forming plant. And on the bottom right is Phytostegia virginiana, which is also called obedient plant. Not because it's a very obedient plant, but because you can move the flowers along those spikes and they'll stay in one place or another. But it is a good spreader as well. And the liatrices, they all kind of tend to stay in a clump, but the clumps get bigger and bigger over time. So a lot of people like wisteria, and there's a place in Leesburg I love to drive by in the spring because there's some of that wisteria and it grows over the road along a power line and it just looks so pretty, but it's not native. It's very aggressive. If you plant it once, it'll, run 10 feet underground and pop up somewhere else. But we have a native Wisteria fructescens, and it is a little bit shorter flower, but it's got, similar leaves and a similar color flower, and it's very pretty. The pollinators can use it. Our native bees, butterflies, whatever, they cannot use that Japanese, Chinese wisteria. So, and our native one is not as aggressive, and you'll find that a lot with plants because they've evolved here with predators who will eat the leaves and keep them in check. Whereas when we bring the foreign plants in, there's nothing to keep them in check, so they just run like crazy. So I want to talk a minute about shrubs. And the first shrub I want to talk about is this meatball guy. Everybody loves it. I see it everywhere. And I can see why people love it because it's evergreen. It's the boxwood. You see it in rows. I mean, you see it everywhere. So I love Ilex glabra, or our native inkberry, to replace the boxwood. It's evergreen. You can get that meaty, meatballish looking shape to it if you keep it pruned. I have a little here, the little inset here shows you some of the different cultivars of it, because the straight species gets 3 to 8 feet tall. If you don't stay on top of it, it gets leggy fast. Ilex glabra compacta, Shamrock, and Gembox are 3 smaller, more compact varieties that we carry, but there's a ton of different varieties out there. You do need a male and female plant to get these nice black berries on it, which rumor has it that those are the berries that Thomas Jefferson used to make the ink to pen the Declaration of Independence. But I don't think that the berries are the most attractive feature of this plant when you're planting for ornamental reasons. If you're planting purely for the wildlife, go for it. But if you live in a managed landscape, neighborhood, or whatever, this is a great replacement for the boxwood because things will eat the leaves. And if you don't want holes in your leaves, you need to rethink how you look at your landscape, because if there's holes in the leaves, that means someone's eating it, and then it's providing a great service. So rethink that. You gotta feed the wildlife. Butterfly bush is another one that people can't believe isn't native. Not only is it not native, but it's invasive. They find it in the woods, and I get people all the time will tell me, Julie, I don't see it being invasive. You know, it's not in my neighbor's yard. I'm not finding it popping up in my yard. Well, it creates seeds, and the birds eat the seeds, and birds can fly miles. And, you know, we find it all the time in the woods, in parks, and just preserves all over the place. So some people say they cannot part with their butterfly bush. If you're that person, cut the flowers off after they've bloomed before they go to seed, bang them up and throw them away so that they don't spread as much. But if you can get rid of it, rip it out, because it's like feeding the butterflies chocolate all the time. And I would love to eat chocolate all the time, but it is not the best thing for me. So we need to provide butterflies with the nectar and the pollen that has the right protein, fat, and sugar content at the right time of the year so that they can make their migrations, so that they can make new butterflies, lay eggs, whatever they need. 2 really nice alternatives to butterfly bush. On the top is Itea virginiana, or Virginia sweet spire. And there's several varieties. If you can't handle a really big plant, there's a couple cultivars that stay small. But the straight species is really pretty. And, you know, those flowers are just beautiful. It does get a really cool seed head on it that stays all winter. And I have the birds constantly frequenting mine to eat those seeds all winter long. The bottom plant with the pinkish flowers is Clethra alnifolia, or sweet shrub. And the one that's pictured there is a cultivar called Ruby Spice. The straight species has white flowers. It is one that will flower in the shade in the summer, which is kind of hard to find. So if you need shade in the summer, that flowers in the shade in the summer, that's the plant to go with. And it's super sweet smelling. That's why it's called sweet shrub. So I have one outside my bedroom window because I just love the way it smells. Barberry is one that we got to get rid of. It's invasive. I see it in the landscape all over the place. And if there's one thing I can tell you to get rid of it, is that it's the host plant for ticks. So if you've got it, get rid of it. We don't want ticks. A great replacement for that is blueberries. The Vaccinium family, there's Angustifolium and Corybosum, which is a high bush and a low bush blueberry. Not only do you get food for you and for the birds, but look at that fall color. I mean, you can't beat that. That fall color is better than so many other plants out there. So blueberries, use it as a landscape plant. It's not just for the garden. Nandina. Now here's one that I don't care if you're going to keep on top of it or not, you should rip it out. I can see why landscapers like to use it because it's evergreen. It has beautiful color in the fall. It has berries. New growth is reddish. And I mean, it's just really cool, and it can handle a variety of conditions. However, it spreads, and the berries on the Nandina are toxic to cedar waxwings. And sometimes you can get a cultivar of Nandina that is sterile and does not produce the berries. But a lot of times what happens is those revert to the original, and then they end up producing berries anyway. a great, really cool plant to replace it with is a witch hazel, the Hamamelis virginiana, which, as you can see on the top, is blooming in the winter. It blooms, there's different types, and they will bloom anywhere from December through February. And how cool is that to have a yellow flower in the dead of winter? And beautiful fall color. Those red leaves edged by yellow, can't beat it. Burning bush is another one that's become really invasive. They find it in the woods all the time. It does have nice color, but look at this picture on the lower left. That's what it looks like the rest of the year. Blah, it's so boring. So if you can get a Fothergilla, which is the top plant, the flowers here are the Fothergilla flowers in the spring, and the bees love it in the spring. I love to sit there with my coffee in the morning and watch the bees get to the Fothergilla. It's very cool. And the fall color, it's probably one of the best fall colors on a shrub. And then a larger shrub is spice bush. And here's the fall color of spice bush. I think that brilliant orange competes with that bright red any day. It's beautiful. And the spice bush is the only host for this guy, our spice bush swallowtail caterpillar. So, it's a great reason to plant spice bush, because without spice bush, we don't have the spice bush swallowtails. Bradford pears, they're starting to bloom right now in Virginia, and they are stinky and messy, and there's a long story, but I'm not going to tell you that tonight because we want to make sure we have time for questions. But you can replace that with Cornus florida or the dogwood, which is the Virginia state tree. It has, you can get different shapes, when you're looking at the plants, and it's just a beautiful tree with nice berries in the fall, with pretty good fall color. I wouldn't say it's the best, but it is an interesting fall color. They don't just turn brown, and the birds love the berries. So it's a really nice one, and you got to plant the Virginia state tree, right? Another plant that we see a lot, I just heard on the radio this morning, we're at like stage 4 of the cherry blossoms. So we do like our cherry blossoms here in the DC area, but I think really much better than the cherry blossoms are red buds, Circus canadensis. And that color in the spring is just amazing. When you drive up and down Route 15 here in Loudoun County, it's flanked on both sides by lots and lots of red buds, and they're very cool because the flowers come out of the branch. They don't make the little petiole of a leaf and put the flower at the end. No, they put them right there along the branch, which is really cool. And I feel like I have been talking like crazy, super fast to get all this information in. So we are going to go to you guys for some questions, and then I'll have some few closing remarks, and I will let you all go.
Woohoo! Wow, that was a great presentation, Julie. That was a lot, and if everybody who's watching is like me, I was writing furiously. But the number one question I think that I am getting is, will they be able to get this presentation? Because a lot of them wanted the names again, they wanted to look at a picture again, all of that.
Yes, so I am going to get the presentation. I'm going to add in their common names as well with the Latin names, and I will get that to BJ, and I can make sure you're copied on that as well, Susan. And okay. I can also post it on my webpage too in the links section.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to put your link again before the end of the program. I'll put it in there. Okay. So we have tons of questions. Maybe we can do these rapid fire. I bet you can answer all of these really fast. The first one, we'll just go. Does Watermark Woods, I'm going to have to look at my Word document as we go. Hannah says, does Watermark Woods do consultations? Would love to have a what would I plant for my home?
We get that all the time. So we do not, but if you email me, I can send you a list of people that I recommend. We also recommend Audubon at Home through Loudoun Wildlife, where they'll send some experts out to your house, talk about your yard. They write a report. It's all free. You don't even need to be a member, but we would love it if you would be a member. And the goal is to get you certified as a wildlife habitat. So it's a really wonderful program. So check that out, and you can email me and I can send you my links.
That sounds fantastic. Okay, next question. Marty says, one of the few things that grow well under my silver maples are Linton roses. Are they bad? And what should I plant instead?
Oh, Marty, I love those too. and they're blooming right now, and they're so pretty, and they're evergreen, and that's another one that blooms in the winter. They can be aggressive and spread like crazy. So I don't want to tell you they're bad because I love them as well. And that's when you have to think about where to make that trade between what's native and what's not native. And we plant for us and we plant for the pollinators, but the pollinators never chip in and they never pull the weeds for me. So I got to plant for me as well. So they're not the worst thing in the world. And I won't judge you if you plant a few Lenten roses.
Okay, great. Kate and some other people asked for the Latin names of things again as you were going along. She wanted the Latin name for green and gold. She was the first person to ask about the Latin name. But can we, I don't know if you know that offhand. What was that one?
Yeah, that one's Chrysogonum virginianum.
Okay.
Chrysogonum-ish.
But if she didn't catch that, she can get the presentation from you, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
just
yeah.
keep that in mind. And you can send it to me and I can also email it out to people and I can give my email address too. That's fine. Kim
Sure.
wanted to know about plants that you were talking about, whether or not they're hazardous to pets. Do you want to address, is it variable based on what you were showing us or?
So that I don't know. I know that there are some websites out there, and I don't know what they are as to what's hazardous to pets and what's not hazardous to pets. My dog seems to, anything he eats, if it's hazardous to him, he throws it up on my nice new carpet. So, I don't keep track of that because I'm not worried about the pets. I'm worried about wildlife.
Okay. We had some people joining us from out of state. Elise wants to know, what zone are we in when you're talking?
So here in Loudoun County, we're 7A, 7B. But when you're talking about native plants, the zone doesn't really matter because, if you look at the Piedmont region, things that are native in the Piedmont, the Piedmont runs from like New Jersey all the way down to North Carolina, which is a lot of different zones. But those plants that have evolved in the Piedmont can grow a lot of times anywhere in the Piedmont. So it's more important to just, if it's native in your county and you can find it in your county on BONAP or the USDA or wherever, it should grow by you, regardless of what zone you're in.
Okay, great. Next question. Do any of these native plants help deter common pests such as thrips, mites, or aphids? That was from Destiny.
So thank you for that question, because there are a couple. Mountain mint, Pycnanthemum muticum, Pycnanthemum tenuifolium, Pycnanthemum virginianum. There's a whole bunch of different ones. And anything in that Monarda family that we looked at in the beginning, because they have fragrant leaves, pests seem to stay away from them. And in fact, a lot of times when we're doing a restoration plant, we'll take one of those two plants and we'll put it in with a plant that pests or deer like, and then they leave it alone. So we do some of that companion planting as well. And when my kids were small, I would take the leaves of either of those plants and rub it on their skin, and it keeps the insects away.
Very interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Margarita and Marty both wanted to ask about using sedges in the place of traditional lawns or for as a substitute for shade grass. Okay, Marty specifically asked about Mount Cuba has been experimenting with wood sedge as a substitute for shade grass. I'm sorry.
Yes, that pretty sedge, the Carex woodii, Carex pennsylvanica, and Carex appalachica are three that people have used to replace grass. They cannot take walking on like a grass can, but they do stay low and they have a similar look. However, when I was growing up, we had this beautiful lawn, but you're not allowed to walk on it. So, maybe sedges are a great alternative for grass, but most of them are for shade. The taller ones for sun would not be a good replacement. So.
Okay. When you were talking about ground covers, someone asked, I'm sorry I didn't get the name, about whether or not all these ground covers are perennials, and do you have any annuals that you would recommend?
Almost all the native plants that we have listed on our website in our database and we sell are perennial. There's a few that are annuals, and we're very careful to make sure that we note that specifically. But they've evolved here, and so they come back every year. The reason a plant is annual, generally, it's because it hasn't evolved here, and so it doesn't know how to handle our winters. We do have a few that are annuals, but generally people don't always know that because they self-seed so heartily in our climate. So everything is perennial pretty much.
Okay. Marlene asked about native versus non-native bleeding heart. How do you tell the difference? But I think you addressed that. You said beautiful frilly leaves, more elongated, longer lasting flowers on the native one, right?
Yes, you can tell mostly by the leaves. The leaves for the native one are much more frilly looking, and they're just deeply lobed on the non-native.
Great. Are bluebells, Frankie wants to know if bluebells are a shade plant.
Yes, they are. They do like shade. So if the soil's baking in the summer, they cannot handle that, even though they're dormant.
Let's see. Oliver said, what was the genus mentioned with the spice bush that started with FO? I don't remember that. Maybe you do.
Fothergilla. Fothergilla, Fothergilla. It's also called witch alder.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you. Nora and Marlene just wanted to let you know they think this is a great presentation. Then we have, let's see, no, I asked Oliver's. Robin wanted to just say that another alternative to Japanese cherry could be serviceberry.
Yes, serviceberry is a beautiful one. Blooming in the spring with white flowers. The deer do like it, but yeah, that's a great one. Thanks for bringing that up. I should add that to my presentation.
Hannah commented, she said a lot of the native plants' Latin names contain Virginiana, which literally means of Virginia. Are Virginia natives better for our wildlife versus trying to find, for example, Zone 6 natives? Better.
Yes. Yeah, and usually when I'm looking for native plants, I never see the zone on them. And we don't include it on our tags here. Some places will, just because that's what people are used to seeing. But when you see, it's just whether or not you choose to include it. That's kind of a hard question. It's like comparing apples to apples. There's not really a difference.
Okay. Oh, we're getting close to the end here. Hopefully we can get them all in. Mike says, do you know any plants that like wet feet on a creek side?
Yes, and that's where you can use our database too to search for it. But a couple like shrubs, buttonbush, the Cephalanthus genus is a good one. Cardinal flowers, there's a Lobelia cardinalis, Lobelia syphilitica. The two cardinal flowers love it moist. There's tons of different grasses. Joe Pyeweed likes it moist on a creek side. Alnus species, they like it moist. Oaks like it moist. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on.
All right, those are great examples to get them started. That sounds good. Linda says, do you ship plants or do you have to pick up plants at your nursery?
I wish I could ship plants, but no, you have to pick them up here.
Okay. Have to make a trip out to Hamilton. That'll be a nice adventure.
It's worth it. And we're right next door to a winery, so you can come and get drunk and then buy plants because you'll spend more money.
Make a whole day trip. Sounds good. Leslie's got the question you were predicting. Can you discuss deer resistance?
Yes.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly why we put that on our website. And all of our plants are now listed with deer sometimes eat, deer rarely eat, and deer never eat. And I compiled that based on many, many different sources. So it's what, I and, all the people who work here have experienced in our own yards. And the Blandy Arboretum has a great list of deer resistance. So I took that into consideration. So you can look on our website and it'll tell you, you can search based on, I only want things that deer never eat. Because I'll tell people that, and I'm like, you know what, I've got this growing right here. The deer walk by it every day. They never eat it. And then somebody also planted in their yard and they're like, they ate it. They mowed it down. But one of the beauties of the native plants here is that they evolved with the deer. And so if you can protect it for those first few years until it gets 4 feet tall or so, especially for shrubs, then the deer can eat it and it can handle that. And it knows how to survive a deer pruning. And sometimes the plant is even better for it. So, it's just knowing what the plants can handle.
Okay, just so you know, we've got Elise and Kathy and Diane and Jackie and probably other people that I've missed telling us what a great presentation you've done and how much they've really enjoyed the side-by-side presentation. Wendy wants to know, what can we plant instead of crepe myrtle? I love crepe myrtle and she loves them too. She said they bloom in the heat of summer.
They do, but their seeds can spread into the forest as well. And there's nothing that blooms 180 days like a crepe myrtle does. But we've got some nice alternatives. River birch, it looks great in the winter with that peeling bark, just like a crepe myrtle does in the winter. Serviceberry, the amelanchiers, look nice too. They have those beautiful flowers. They have a decent fall color as well. I like red buds in place of that as well, because red buds also have that heart-shaped leaf. So, I think there's some summer interest too, because it's just a really unique shape. What else? I think serviceberry is what I planted. We just did some landscaping, what I planted instead of planting crepe myrtles. But yes, there's a couple. I'm sure that, when we sign off tonight, I'll think of a few more.
Okay, great. I was trying to put my email in the chat, so if anybody wants a presentation, I can get them connected with you and with Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy. But here we go. How do you convince neighbors to replace their invasive plants?
That's hard, right? A lot of people have good luck with, that Audubon at Home program. Once you get certified, you get a sign to put out in your yard. And so that's kind of a conversation starter. And you can say, look what I did, and this is why I did it, because I'm wanting to support wildlife and save this planet. Because since 1975, the population of the world has been at an unsustainable level, and now we're starting to see the fallout from that with, climate shifting and stuff like that. So it's, you can start that conversation. It's a little bit like discussing religion or politics, though, and it can be a hard decision to have. A lot of people, HOAs are starting to go that way more and more. We're working with more and more HOAs. Landscapers, a lot of times people are planting things that they don't know are native. And so if you point that out, that can be like a gateway into, having the conversation. And by the way, did you know that this plant that you have there kills birds? Or did you know that, it's like feeding chocolate to your butterflies? And sometimes having those meaningful conversations with people and having a story to relate can be helpful. There's a couple of books, Bringing Nature Home by Doug Tallamy, Silent Spring by Rachel Carson has some of those stories. Tallamy tells a great story about watching the chickadees feed their young, and that they take like 500 caterpillars a day per nest to feed their young. And if they don't have caterpillars, the baby birds don't make it. So if we don't have plants that have caterpillars on them, then we're not going to have new baby birds. So, people love birds, and, birds are indicators as to what's going on in our environment. So, making those connections with people, I think, help. And, maybe you just take them on a bird walk and to get that spark started in somebody. And Loudoun Wildlife has 3 bird walks a month.
It's fantastic. I did not know that. I will look that up myself. Okay. Wow, the questions have really multiplied. So I know we're running over time. We'll try to get a few more in. Wendy says, any replacements for spring bulbs like tulips and daffodils?
So daffodils are getting to be invasive. They're all over the place. But I think if you, put those plants in that bloom in the spring, and there's some phlox that bloom in the spring that are really nice, that are evergreen. So not only are you replacing your tulips and daffodils that only bloom in the spring, you're getting more seasons of interest. So start to look at things that, they provide way more than tulips and daffodils do. But that color, that pop of color, can be hard. But, monardas have great color. Phlox has great color. There's lots of things with great color. Echinaceas, not truly native right here in Virginia, but we all think of it and use it as a native. And it comes in every color under the sun. So it's kind of like a gateway drug for natives. So lots of choices.
So much to choose from. Okay, Paul wants to know, can a native ground cover be used under fruit trees as opposed to having bare ground?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All
and
right.
we talked a lot of different native ground covers, so lots of choices there.
Yeah, so maybe Paul, if he gets the presentation, he can go back and look at some of those choices you listed.
Yeah.
L. Miller wants to know, what native can outcompete Japanese stiltgrass?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. That's one of my favorite plants these days, and we have a hard time keeping it in stock. I fight Japanese stiltgrass like crazy here. So about 3 years ago, I did a little experiment with Pachyra aurea, and I think the lovely botanists have changed the name on it to Senecio aurea. There's also another version. I can't remember the name right now, but anyway, it's the Pachyra or Senecio genus, and it's also called golden ragwort. But don't let the ragwort sway you. It's an evergreen, which is fantastic. So the stiltgrass has a hard time dropping seed there because there's always leaves on the ground. It's an aggressive spreader. It comes up with a yellow flower in the spring, and the seeds, some fall and some go by wind. So it spreads aggressively, which is really good to outcompete that stiltgrass. I had to pull sporadically stiltgrass for the first 2 years, and now the last few years, no stiltgrass in that area. So Pachyra aurea or golden ragwort is a winner when competing with stiltgrass. It's the only thing I've found that can reliably compete with it.
Okay. Now people are wanting to share their own groups that they recommend for some of these native groups, native plants. They're saying, don't forget Plant Nova natives.
Yes, love Plant Nova natives.
The Pocahontas chapter of the Virginia Master Naturalists, the North Carolina Extension Gardener Toolbox, the plantvirginianatives.org. So I'll just throw those out there for what they're worth, and you can comment on those if you want. And somebody is asking about pawpaws. Are they hard to transplant?
So pawpaws have a taproot. So if you're digging them up and moving them, it's hit and miss. If it's a single plant, they tend to colonize. So a lot of times it's hard to get enough root to transplant. So it's just depending on how they grow. We do get some from a guy here in Loudoun County who grows pawpaws from seeds. So it's a single plant that you're getting in the pot. So they're easy to plant out of the pot, but if you're digging them up from your yard or your neighbor's yard to move somewhere else, they can be tricky, but try and try again. I always tell people, if you don't kill plants regularly, you're not trying hard enough to garden.
Here's a great one. Any options? Julia wants to know, any options for mosquito deterrents? Any thoughts on the impacts of yard mosquito service?
So there is a local person who does spray, and she says it's all safe, natural things that she uses. We don't use it here. The mountain mint species can deter mosquitoes, but usually you have to wipe it on your skin to help. We live in the woods on 30 acres with water. You know, we have a stream. There's places where the water sits for long periods of time, so we do have mosquitoes. We rarely have a problem with the mosquitoes because I plant so much for the birds and dragonflies. So between the birds and the dragonflies, we are rarely bothered by mosquitoes, and we sit outside all the time. So I think if you plant for those natural predators of mosquitoes, you have much better luck than trying to control the actual mosquito through chemicals.
Okay, let's see if we can get in a couple more before we call it quits here. Rebecca says, since Julie said her site has cultivars, but not all cultivars are beneficial to the local fauna, is that marked for each plant on your site, at your site?
So we do have the cultivars marked because the names are in quotes, or on our site it's parentheses because our database couldn't handle quote marks. So that's how you know that it's not the straight species. But as for which cultivar is better than other cultivars, the best thing I can tell you is look at the plant itself and see if the leaf is similar or the flower is similar or different to the original plant, because there's just not a lot of research out there. And Mount Cuba has been doing some of it, and that's been helpful. Doug Tallamy has been doing some of it. He's a professor at the University of Delaware, and he's got students to help him with that. But there's not a ton of research out there. And part of the reason we carry so many cultivars is, because we like those colors, and it's better than if you planted a non-native. So I'd much rather have you come here and get a cultivar and plant that than go to Lowe's and Home Depot, plant a non-native, or even plant a native from one of those stores who's treated it with a pesticide, and then you come home and all the bees who fed on it are now dead. So That's one of the beauties of coming to a smaller place like myself, or there's a couple we've in Northern Alexandria. We've got Nature by Design. There's Ursanga in Springfield, Hill House in Castleton. There's a new one, Seven Bends in Winchester. These places that don't use pesticides or chemicals, and that you're giving wildlife a clean meal.
Fantastic. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to sort through all these great comments that we've gotten here. How about Sandra says, I have a calacanthus that is too big for my yard. When can I dig it up so that it will survive?
I did the same thing in calacanthus, which is also called Carolina allspice, and it's a beautiful maroon flower. It tends to sucker, and they can get big and they'll spread out. And I dug it up, and from that one shrub came up with about 30 little shrubs, and I would say about half of them survived the transplanting. I did it at the end of spring, which is the total wrong time to do that. You should do it when it's not flowering. So really early spring, like now, or right before, winter. So I would say maybe November is a good time when the plant is dormant.
Okay, Julie, we're going to wind it up here. I hope it's okay with you. I'm going to put some information in the chat box that includes a link to the YouTube channel where people can find this later on if they missed part of it tonight, and a link to a program survey, and just a couple other promotions about how to find more gardening programs at the library on our website. And in the meantime, then, while I'm doing that, I'm going to ask you one last question, which is, do you sell bare root shrubs and trees?
We do not sell bare root. There are some mail order places that you can get bare root from, and usually when people are buying bare root, they're buying in bulk. So we don't sell that way. We do buy that way sometimes and pot them up for ourselves and get them started. Make sure that they come out of dormancy, okay, and we'll sell them to you. But we don't sell them ourselves bare root.
Well, I honestly think we could probably keep this conversation going for another hour. People love talking about all of this. It's clear, and they really, really enjoyed your presentation. They've had so many positive comments in the chat box tonight. So I want to thank everybody who tuned in tonight. This was great to have all of you online. Again, tell your friends to watch it either from Loudoun Wildlife Conservancy or from the Loudoun County Public Library online programs YouTube channel, which I put the link in down there. And I think, Julie, if you want to have the final word, you can feel free to give out your email and anything else you want to say as parting words tonight.
Sure. So my email is julie@watermarkwoods.com, and it's on my website as well. And one program through the library, Loudoun Wildlife, myself, and Birch Tree Bookstore in Leesburg that's coming up is we're doing a plant or gardening wildlife book club, and we're reading Braiding Sweetgrass. So we'll get together in person and virtually to discuss that. So let's keep the conversation going. I will be there in person, and it's a lot of fun. We open April 1st, and everybody who works here is really good at natives, and we're always happy to spend time with you and answer your questions and help you choose plants. So come see us. We have people who come and don't buy anything. So, don't feel like you're pressured. We just want to spread the love of native plants and help educate people. So you're welcome to just come and hang out with us if you want to. But before I leave, I just wanted to tell you all that 95% of the United States was once habitat. And today, only 5% remains, and that's primarily in parks. The rest of it is privately owned. So we need to learn how to live with nature and coexist with nature on our own properties, because if we don't do it, no one else will. So if you can just replace a small part of lawn, you're raising the biodiversity and you're doing good and you're making the difference in the environment. So do what you can, bite off small chunks, always be editing your yard. And there's my website. I do post things on Facebook, so you can look out there to see if we have extra hours, or our tree and shrub sale just went online today, so you can check that out. But happy planting, and thanks for joining us, and I hope to see everybody out there in the wild.